The alien veteran faced humanity. Once he never forgot what he witnessed. The smoke was already rising when we broke through the clouds. I had not expected that. My scanner showed a low-yield conflict zone, 2 factions, small arms, localized. Nothing my unit had not walked through 100 times on a dozen different worlds. I told Fayan to keep the cloak steady and brought us down low over the tree line. Below us, the forest opened into a wide, flat valley, and the valley was on fire. Not the forest. The valley itself. The ground was burning. I pressed my face to the observation glass and watched. 40 years in the Vrethan military. 40 years of campaigns, sieges, pacifications, and extractions across the arm of this galaxy. I had seen fire used as a weapon. I had seen civilizations burn their own land to deny it to an enemy. But these creatures, these humans, were fighting inside the fire, moving through it, dragging each other through it. We had been briefed on them 3 cycles before. The conclave file was thin, bipedal, carbon-based, average lifespan, criminally short, physically unimpressive, 1 atmosphere of tolerance, narrow temperature range, soft tissue with no natural armor. The assessor who wrote the file had used the word fragile 4 times. I remember thinking that was generous. What I was watching through the glass did not match the file. There were 12 of them pinned behind a collapsed stone wall. I could see the ones shooting at them clearly, maybe 30 or 40 soldiers coming down the ridge in formation, well armed, moving with discipline. The 12 behind the wall were low on ammunition. 2 of them were not moving. One was trying to hold his own arm together with his bare hand and keep firing with the other. I ran the tactical numbers automatically, the way any Vrethan officer does. 12 against 40. Limited ammunition, 2 confirmed casualties. No visible extraction route. No reinforcements within observable range. The calculation took less than a second. They were finished. Then one of them stood up. He was not large. None of them were large. He had dark hair, and his face was covered in ash, and something dark that I understood was his own blood. He did not look at the 40 soldiers coming toward him. He turned and looked at the 11 behind the wall and said something. I could not hear it. Our audio capture was still calibrating. But whatever he said made 3 of them get up immediately and start moving the 2 who could not move on their own. Then that man, that single bleeding human with ash on his face, turned back toward the 40 and started walking forward. Not running. Walking. He fired as he walked. He was shouting something. Loud enough that even through the glass I could see the shape of it in his throat. He drew every gun in that valley toward him. Every shot, every eye, every barrel. And behind him, his people moved. They moved through a gap in the burning tree line that had been invisible until he created the distraction to make it possible. He knew what he was doing. I watched him fall. He went down on one knee, then caught himself, then went down again, and did not get up. But by then, the 11 were gone. 11 people were alive because one man decided, in less than a heartbeat, that their lives were worth more than his own. My second in command, a veteran named Orel, who had fought beside me through 9 campaigns and never once shown surprise at anything, made a sound I had never heard him make. A low, quiet sound, almost below hearing. I did not look at him. I could not look away from the valley. That was only the first hour. By the second hour, I understood why the Conclave Advisory had said, observe only. They had seen footage. They knew what we would feel if we watched long enough. They sent veterans specifically because a younger soldier might have broken protocol out of some panicked instinct to interfere, not out of sympathy for the humans, but out of a deep animal alarm at what they were witnessing. Humans do not fight like any species I have ever studied. Every species I have encountered, including my own, fights with survival as the base calculation. You measure the threat. You measure your odds. You advance when advancing improves your odds, and you retreat when it does not. This is not cowardice. This is reason. This is what intelligence produces when it is applied to violence. Humans fight as if survival is a secondary concern. I watched a medic, a small woman named, I would later learn from their own radio chatter, Clara, cross open ground 4 times to pull wounded soldiers back to cover. She had no weapon. She was marked with a red symbol on her arm that I recognized from the Conclave file as a designation meaning non-combatant. The soldiers on the other side knew what the symbol meant. They shot at her anyway. She ran anyway. She did not stop. She went back out a fifth time, and a bullet passed through her left shoulder, and she went down, and I was certain she was finished, and then she got up and dragged the man she had gone out to reach, all the way back to the wall, and collapsed only after he was behind cover. Oral said, very quietly, that Clara's species should not be possible. I agreed with him. What I could not explain to Oral, what I could not fully explain to myself, was that what Clara did was not unusual. It was not a rare act among her people. As I watched, I saw it happen again and again in different forms. A soldier, covering a retreat, he would not survive himself. A man throwing himself onto something explosive to protect the people around him. Two soldiers going back into a burning structure to find someone who was not even confirmed to still be alive. They kept doing it, over and over. Different people, same instinct. Among the Vrethan, we have a word for self-sacrifice. It is an old word, mostly used in religious texts. It describes something mythological, something that perhaps happened once in the distant past, and was sacred enough to be written down. We do not expect to see it. We do not train for it. It is not a thing we build tactics around, because it is not a thing we believe our soldiers will do in reality. Humans build their entire way of fighting around it. I spent the third hour running numbers that did not want to cooperate. I was trying to build a threat assessment, the standard document every scout commander files after initial contact with a new species. I had filed over 60 such assessments. They were routine. You list physical capabilities, technological level, social structure, military organization, and then you rate the species on a scale that the conclave uses to decide how to approach first contact. Most species below a certain threshold get absorbed quietly. Most above it get a diplomatic greeting and a trade agreement. I could not place humans on the scale. Their bodies were weak. That part was accurate. I could confirm it with my own eyes. They broke easily. They bled easily. The cold slowed them. The heat exhausted them. They needed to consume food and water at a rate that would make them logistically dependent in a way no Vrethan soldier ever was. They slept, every single cycle, for a substantial portion of their available hours. They were, by every biological measurement, not built for war. And yet, their technology was advancing at a pace that the Conclave's own historians described as, and I am using the direct translation here, irrational. They had gone from primitive animal husbandry to early atmospheric flight in a span of time so compressed that 3 separate Conclave review panels had flagged it as a data error and sent people to re-verify. It was not a data error, it was just humans. Every time something tried to stop them, they invented a way past it. Disease. They mapped their own biology at the molecular level and started rewriting it. Resource scarcity. They developed energy extraction methods that their own scientists had called impossible 2 generations before the breakthrough. Climate collapse. They began, slowly and with enormous internal argument, but they began, restructuring the systems of an entire planet. They failed constantly. That was the part I had the hardest time processing. They failed, and they recorded the failure, and they studied the failure, and they tried again with the failure in mind. My species, when we encounter a failure, we route around it. We find a different path. Humans walk directly into the failure, pick it apart while it is still burning, and then build the next attempt on top of the wreckage of the last one. Their history was a sequence of catastrophes, interrupted by inventions, and every catastrophe made them more capable than they had been before. I had a scout named Dren on my team. Young, excellent instincts. He had grown up hearing about the Vrethan campaigns the way young soldiers do, with the pride and the distance that makes war seem clean. He came to me in the 4th hour and asked if we were going to file for a full assessment team. I told him I was still working on the primary report. He stood there for a moment, and then he asked a question I was not expecting. He asked if I was afraid of them. I told him to return to his post. He went. But the question sat with me for the rest of that day, and for every cycle since. Was I afraid? I had faced species with 4 times our physical strength. I had been on worlds where the gravity alone could kill a soldier who stepped outside the wrong boundary. I had watched a species that communicated through directed radiation strip a conclave frigate down to its frame in 11 minutes. Fear was a thing I understood and had long since made peace with. Fear was information. You felt it, and you used it, and you moved. What I felt watching the humans was different. It was closer to the feeling I had experienced once, early in my career, standing at the edge of a canyon on a world called Veth Minor, looking down into a drop so deep the bottom was a different color than the air around me. Not the fear of falling, something older than fear, something that made my body understand, without any help from my mind, that I was standing next to something that existed on a different scale than I did. In the evening, when the valley finally went quiet, the surviving soldiers came together. They did not shout. They did not celebrate. The ones who could walk helped the ones who could not. A man named Owen, I caught his name from the radio, sat down next to the body of the man with ash on his face and did not move for a long time. He was not crying. He was not speaking. He simply sat there, and I understood, without any frame of reference for it among my own people, that he was doing something important, that the sitting was not wasted time, that he was doing something his people believed the dead deserved, which was to not be left alone immediately. They built a small fire, not for warmth. The temperature was suitable. They built it and sat around it, and one of them started speaking, and the others listened, and occasionally, one of them would speak briefly, and then go quiet again. I kept the audio receiver on. They were talking about the man in the valley. His name had been Garrett. He had a daughter. She was 4 years old, and her name was Lucy, and she was afraid of dogs but loved the rain. And Garrett had told Owen once that he wanted to take her to the coast when he got home so she could hear the ocean for the first time. Lucy would never hear the ocean with her father. I sat with that thought for longer than I should have. I have no children. Vrethan military service and reproduction exist in different phases of life, and I had stayed in the military past the phase. I did not understand the weight of it the way Owen did, but I understood the shape of it. Garrett had made his calculation not from discipline, not from training alone, but from something he was carrying inside him. A face, a voice, a child who was afraid of dogs, and that thing he was carrying had not made him retreat. It had made him walk forward. I think about that often. I finished my report near midnight. It ran long, much longer than standard. The Conclave Review Board later told me it was the longest initial contact assessment in the archive. I did not apologize for the length. I told them every word was necessary. My official recommendation was clear. Do not contact aggressively. Do not provoke. Do not allow any Conclave military asset to enter their system with a hostile posture. Monitor from extreme distance. When they achieve faster-than-light capability, and the mathematics of their current trajectory made when a more accurate word than if, open diplomatic contact immediately, and extend every courtesy available under Conclave Charter. My commanding officer read the report and called me in person, which he had not done in 6 years. He asked me why I was recommending such an elevated diplomatic posture for a pre-contact species that had not yet left their own solar system. He asked me if I had perhaps been in the field too long and needed a rotation back to the core systems. I told him I had been in the field exactly long enough. He pressed me. He wanted numbers. He wanted the tactical breakdown that justified the recommendation. He said the review board would not accept a report that read, in his words, more like a philosophical journal than a military assessment. I told him the numbers were in the report and he could read them. Then I told him something that was not in the report. I told him that in 40 years of campaigning across 31 worlds and contact events with 19 distinct species, I had never once, not once, submitted a recommendation that included the phrase, "Do not make them an enemy." I had submitted recommendations about managing enemies, neutralizing threats, absorbing resistant populations, but I had never told the Conclave that a species existed which we should go out of our way, at any cost, to never antagonize. I was telling them now. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked what it was specifically that I had seen on the surface that justified this. I thought about Clara crossing the open ground for the 5th time, with a bullet already in her shoulder. I thought about the man with the ash on his face walking toward 40 guns so that 11 people he loved could run. I thought about Owen sitting in the dark next to someone who could no longer know he was there, sitting anyway, because Garrett deserved that. I thought about a 4-year-old girl named Lucy who loved the rain. I told him I had watched a species that had no logical reason to keep surviving, by refusing to accept the logic. I told him I had watched them fight not because they thought they could win, but because the people behind them needed them to try. I told him I had watched them grieve not as weakness, but as the exact thing that made them dangerous. Because a species that feels that much, that carries that much, does not forget, does not give up, and does not stop. He did not ask any more questions after that. I retired 4 years later. I live quietly now on Vrethen Prime. The light here is different from what I grew up with. Cooler, more even, and in the mornings when I sit at the window, I sometimes take out the one thing I kept from that mission. It is a small photograph, the kind humans print on flat material and carry in their clothing. I found it in the valley after the soldiers left, pressed into the mud near where Garrett had gone down. It shows a family, a man, a woman, and a small girl standing between them. They are outdoors, somewhere green. They are all looking at the camera and smiling, the specific kind of smile that people make when someone they love is behind the lens. The little girl has her arms stretched out to both sides, like she is trying to hold the whole world at once. I do not know if they are Garrett's family. I will never know. There is no name on the back, only a date in human numerals. The photograph is worn now from handling. I have looked at it more times than I can count. The Conclave announced 6 weeks ago that humanity has achieved faster-than-light travel and is formally requesting membership in the Galactic Conclave. The debate is already loud. There are factions who argue the risks. There are economists modeling the resource implications. There are strategists who want additional assessment periods, more observation, more data. I was asked by a young Conclave aide to submit a formal endorsement or objection for the record, given my unique history with the species. I submitted 3 sentences. Welcome them, honor them, and if you are ever unwise enough to stand against them, do not pray for victory. Pray that they remember how to forgive, because I have seen what they are capable of when they do not. I faced humanity once. I was the most decorated scout commander in the Vrethen military, with 40 campaigns behind me and not a single failed mission on my record. I have spent every year since trying to explain what I saw in that valley, and I am not sure language, in any system I know, is large enough to hold it. I only know this. The galaxy is not ready for them. And I mean that as the highest thing one soldier can say about another.